Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us for this segment, we have Jodie Gunzberg, Managing Director with CoinDesk Indexes, to discuss the three key risks to crypto: one, market risk, technology risk, and regulatory risk. It's great to have you with us, Jodie. Those are three pretty big risk factors there. Walk us through some of that.
They are pretty big risk factors. And I think that there are risk factors that are generally present in most assets, but the market risk is the risk of any new technology. And then the technology risk is the risk that the underlying technology might not work. And then the regulatory risk receives the most attention, but I think its nuances are often poorly understood. And right now, I would say that the need for regulatory clarity is most important for the right infrastructure to be built for compliance.
What are some of the other more traditional risks associated with crypto?
Yeah, the three that I just mentioned, the market, technology, and regulatory risk, are traditional and again present in most assets in varying degrees, but they feed into more familiar metrics like volatility, correlation, drawdowns, Sharpe ratio. And I think that institutions and advisors using allocation software are perhaps more comfortable looking at those kinds of numbers that measure the impacts of the fundamental risks.
Are you concerned about barriers to scaling to a larger user base?
I'm more concerned about the timing as to when the regulatory rules are clearer and when the infrastructure is in place for compliance by the institutional investor. So to me, it's not a matter of if blockchain technology and digital assets will scale, but I think it's a matter of when. And that, again, is another huge risk, because if you have your thesis right, but your timing is wrong and you aren't well diversified, you may not be able to withstand the drawdowns. So it's a bit like selling insurance. You've got to make it through those tough times.
Yeah. Tell us more about Bitcoin's relationship to the US dollar.
Yeah, first, and perhaps the most important thing is to recognize that Bitcoin is priced in US dollars. So all else equal, the relationship between the two is inverse. However, with where we are in the development of Bitcoin, we aren't quite at the point of all else is equal, if we ever get there, because it's more of an economic assumption. But on average, in the past 5 years, for every 1% drop in the US dollar, Bitcoin rose nearly 60%, which is relatively huge as compared with some other assets. And then even though the relationship between Bitcoin and the dollar is negative, Bitcoin still rose on average 12% when the dollar rose by 1%. So, that's one measure of sensitivity. And then you can look at the 30-day annualized volatility of Bitcoin, which is 12 times that of the dollar. And Bitcoin still remains relatively uncorrelated with the dollar, measuring just over zero now.
And Jodie, what does the industry need to do to help manage Bitcoin's volatility? And when I mean volatility, it doesn't just mean to the downside either. Swings to the upside that are 8, 9, 10% can also be volatile to a sense.
Yeah, that's right. Most of the time people are managing the volatility to the downside, but volatility is a two-way street. And what we really need is we need the regulatory clarity, because without knowing the rules, you can't play the game. So we need that, and we need better infrastructure for the institutions to get compliant. And then we need a deeper derivatives market that will allow the banking services here to support the Bitcoin need to strengthen and grow from a risk management perspective. So all of this will reduce the volatility. I think it'll increase the investor confidence and accelerate the institutional adoption. But in the meantime, investors can manage their portfolio volatility by diversifying with a limited allocation.
All right, Jodie, we appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Thanks for having me.